Now, explain to our listeners how this works, because you're not leader and deputy, you would be leader together. You've already done this, so you've got some experience as agent. How does it work? Do you do a sentence each, a word each? How should I interview both at once?
Well, in most circumstances, to be honest, you would be interviewing one Green politician, but there are times when we will come on together. You get two for the price of one, and you'll get to hear us both answering the questions. And, you know, in all seriousness, as co-leaders, and I've experienced this with Carla over the last 4 years, you get two sets of skills, two sets of backgrounds, two parts of the countries that we're from. And when you look at how the world of work operates this year, this time, whether it's in the private sector, whether it's in charities, the idea that you have a collaborative, more flexible form of working, including at the top levels, is not that unusual. And actually in politics, Carla and I have shown that although it's not happening in other parties, that it's worked very well for the Green Party in the last 4 years. We've had our most successful period ever, doubling our number of councillors. There's now over 40 councils where Greens are part of running the administration, and our best ever general election last year, a record vote, a move to 4 MPs, and we now want to take that to the next level, but it's based on a foundation that Carla and I have delivered during the last 4 years.
How does it work? Because there must be some things, Ellie, that you don't agree on. And at least if you've got a leader of a political party, they're the boss.
Do you know what? I mean, Adrian, somebody asked me the other day, is that what have you and Adrian disagreed on most recently? And it was something like, you know, some wording of a bit of text on the website or something. It was, of course, people disagree on things all of the time, but it's that classic thing in politics. There is so much more that unites us and that divides us. And a bit like Adrian was saying there, if you've got two heads, it really is better than one, because you test ideas out against each other, you come to a common view together. And that means that we're stronger as a party. And so I think we're stronger as a team, and we're stronger as a party because we've got this co-leadership model. There are pros and cons either way, but it's definitely not a disadvantage. And I think with Adrian and me, you've got two different characters, two different personalities, but really united around that kind of core foundation in Green values.
What about the possibility that you're sort of diluting your awareness that in politics, particularly for smaller parties, in terms of how you punch through into the public consciousness? You know, Nigel Farage is living proof that a one-man band can get quite a long way.
Yeah, but it's not because, you know, it's not like any one-man band can get a long way, is it? It's actually, you know, that it depends on the personality, it depends on what they're saying, and frankly, it depends on the content. And we know that because we've got two people, a bit like Adrian was saying, we kind of get twice as many opportunities in a way. We can cover twice as many media bases, if you like. But
I'm looking now at you. This is a rude way of putting it, but I'm looking at YouGov's polling of politicians. Only 22% of people know who you are, Adrian. 97% of people know Nigel Farage's.
Well, journalists like asking me about the amount of coverage that journalists give to the Green Party. What I'm focused on
this is a YouGov poll on the percentage of people who've heard of you is 22%.
Well, look, the Green Party has never been about the cult of personality. We've always been about the values that we stand on.
Wouldn't you be doing better if you were?
I'm not convinced about that. And look, we're at a time in politics where people are feeling desperate, completely understandably, because the two old parties, the mainstream of politics, has let people down over such a long period. And of course it would be easy for people to look around for easy answers, people who are shouting the loudest. But I think ultimately people want politics that's grounded in values, that's grounded in practical answers to their everyday lives. And you know, we are living in an era of five-party politics, and any party that's going to be successful will have more than one prominent figure, just like we do. We've got 4 MPs representing the party day in, day out in Parliament at the heart of British politics. And that's why it's so important that we continue to have our leaders here in Westminster, so that we are the ones representing the party's vision day to day and ready to take the party to the next level.
One thing I want to ask you about is, you say we're in five-party politics. Clearly what's happening is the two old parties, Labour and Conservatives, have gone down a lot in the polls. On the right, the Reform UK seem to be picking up all of the sort of fallout of that. On the left, if you like, it's going two ways. And actually, if you add together support for the Greens and the Lib Dems, you'd be in some polls you'd be in the lead, or you'd be in second place. What do you disagree with the Lib Dems on?
Oh, a heck of a lot. I mean, don't get me started. For example, VAT on private school fees. You know, that was something that we voted completely differently on. We'll be voting on differently on things today.
So where are you on VAT on private schools?
We think it's a good idea. We're with Labour on that particular thing because we want to invest in education for absolutely everybody, but the Lib Dems have a completely different view on that. So, we have a multi-party political system.
But
our
on
electoral
the
system
big things, broadly the tax system, the focus on the environment.
We're far stronger than the Lib Dems on wealth tax, for example. We're saying that we should have a tax on wealth above £10 million so that we can invest in public services. I think it's clear that we have much more radical ideas than the Lib Dems in certain areas.
So you would never come to an arrangement with the Lib Dems?
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I mean, I've said, I don't know how many times on all sorts of media shows, I believe in the politics cooperation, that really, really do. And that's what I saw when I was a member of the European Parliament. It is possible to do politics where you bring people together around a table, have a grown-up conversation, find out where the common ground is. I think we've got an amazing kind of pitch to voters, and what we've shown in the places where we have targeted seats, we have won them, and we've won them in places that were traditionally Conservative and traditionally Labour and traditionally Lib Dem, and in fact places that have previously voted strongly for right-wing candidates at the council level. So what we've shown is that people from all sorts of kind of old tribal divisions, if you like, have decided to vote Green, and when they do, they really like it. And I think what that shows, and what I've found in the 10 years I've been involved in politics, is that people actually aren't tribal. Like they might vote a certain way because they've been brought up in families and always voted that way, or they might vote a particular way out of a protest vote, and I think that's what we've seen in the council elections just recently. But fundamentally, people want politicians they can trust, people they believe in, people they know are committed to public service, and people who've got decent ideas about what it is that we need to change in the country to make it fairer and greener, and that's what Greens offer.
If that is where the country is, why is Nigel Farage on 29% in the polls and you're on 10%?
Well, I mean, linking back to what you were saying about media coverage, the man spends a heck of a lot of his time running a TV show instead of doing the job as an MP he's supposed to do. That party is very undemocratic.
But why don't you get a TV show? Why do you have one leader who gets a TV show?
We don't have multi-millionaire and billionaire backers, but if there are ethical ones, we'd be delighted to hear
But the
from
reason that
them.
Nigel Farage is striking a chord with almost a third of voters is not just because he's got a show on the telly.
Well, he's trying to offer simplistic answers to the very real problems that people face. And I understand why people are looking around, even why people are looking at reform, because they feel utterly let down.
Greens,
but the travesty is...
where do you stand on immigration? Is immigration too high?
Well, our view on immigration is that people who have come to this country have offered a huge amount to our society. And
but everybody says that.
When I think about immigrants, I think about
is
people
the number too high?
People who are treating our loved ones in hospitals, looking after them in care homes. And actually, the truth is, if you speak to people in the care sector, they will highlight that there's a huge skill shortage.
We've been talking about trust in politics. But do you want to answer the question?
No.
Is immigration too high?
There is no magic number that is the correct number for immigration.
But is the current number too high?
I wouldn't say necessarily so.
Okay.
Let's look at the reality of what immigration is about, right? The immigration, the legal migration that we've got is basically in kind of three portions. So one portion is the people who've come here, like the Ukrainians, like 300,000 Ukrainians who've come here, who we have offered sanctuary to in a time of great need of protection against violence. That is something that I think everybody in the UK is rightly proud of. Then there's another chunk of people who've come here to work in our public services, like the care sector, for example. And that sector would collapse without them. And then there's another chunk of people who come here as students, and they put in shed loads of money into our education system, frankly. They learn a lot here. They contribute to our economy through their fees, and then they go back to their homes and they've got really good perspectives on the UK, and we build relationships. It's not but just seriously, Matt, over the last 20 years, successive parties, Labour and Conservative, have said we want to get it down to X number, and they have always failed. What we should be doing,
but you're not even saying that.
I'm not even saying we should set a particular
but would
number.
you cut it? Could it be higher under the Greens?
I don't think immigration is damaging to the country.
Okay.
This is the problem. Reform's whole narrative is that immigration is the cause of the problems in the country. That actually really isn't true. The problems in the country are that we have totally failed to tackle the gross inequalities. The failure to invest in public services is because we haven't had politicians who are brave enough to say we should tax wealth rather than, for example, taxing work or squeezing benefits for people who are struggling to get by on PIP, which actually is a benefit that helps people with disabilities to work, or indeed, taking away money from people who depended on the winter fuel allowance. We have had two main parties who've utterly let people
so on
down.
that, let's clear that up. On the winter fuel allowance, would you give it back to everyone, or
Well, generally the Green Party makes the case for universal benefits because otherwise there's a risk of people falling between the cracks because they haven't been able to apply or there's a hugely costly administrative system. So that's our preference. But I think the government could have made a case for introducing a means-tested benefit, but it would have needed to put the threshold at a much higher level. There were so many people, including people who have no private pension at all, that couldn't get pension credit, who have just been really struggling this winter. Pensioners I've heard from in my constituency who haven't had the heating on all winter. So it's about time the government does review it, as it looks like it's eventually going to do. But there's just been own goal after own goal from this government, whether it's the personal independence payments, balancing the books on the back of some of the most ill and disabled people in society, whether it's been the failure to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which penalises children and poorer families around the country, on whether it's the fact that in real terms we're seeing the funding to our hospitals and schools around the country cut. Head teachers in my constituency are saying to me, we've had to cut our budget so much that if we carry on in this direction, we're going to see redundancies need to be made to teaching staff.
Where do you get...
It's a desperate situation. And that's why Ellie said...
But you're opposing all the cuts.
We're the ones... Well, that's why we're the ones who are in a credible position to do that, because we're the ones willing to say we would ask the very richest in society, the multimillionaires, the billionaires, to pay more in tax so we can invest in those things.
Just finally and quickly, your last manifesto had ambitions to nationalise railways, water and the big five energy companies. How much would that cost?
Well, the railways Labour is doing anyway, at basically zero cost. Nationalising water, there's quite a lot of debate over this, but the figures that are bandied around are way out of what would be realistic. But the reality is that if you look what's happened with water... If
you're going to nationalise the big five energy companies, how do you do that?
I honestly haven't got the figures in the top of my head. I'm afraid I haven't read the manifesto.
That's how you got elected.
No, I think we've got...
You're standing to lead your party.
If you look at the water companies, the issue is that they have been profiting from failure. And if it was a proper marketplace, which it's not, it's a monopoly,
but it would cost money,
you would have seen the share price go down and down and down because they haven't been investing in the basic regulatory needs of that sector. So the actual value of the company is not that high.
If you look, for example, Thames Water, right? But if you look at I think the figure is something like £86 billion that the privately owned water companies have taken out of the pockets of consumers over the past 30 years. That is money out of the pockets of taxpayers. And if we let them keep going for another 30 years doing that, that'll be another tens and tens of billions of pounds. So policy has got to be long term, and this is one of the problems we've got with politics at the moment. People bandy around policies that are designed to appeal to a small subsection of the electorate just because there's a general election coming up, and then they go and betray them as soon as the election's over. We actually need a better sort of politics where the views of the whole country are represented adequately in Parliament, and where we can think about what the country needs 10, 20, 30 years down the line, including publicly owned public services that work in the interests of the public.
Ellie Chowns, Adrian Ramsay, running to be the new co-leaders of the Greens. Nominations open on June the 2nd, vote will be on the 1st of August, and the result will be announced on September the 2nd. You've got a long time.
We have indeed.
Politics is a marathon, not a sprint. In every respect.
Well, we'll get you back. It's good to see Ellie Chowns and Adrian Ramsay.